Thank you, Bob. Mayor Farmer, we have a relatively small crowd inside tonight. Is that indicative of most budget hearings?
Well, the two budget hearings that this council has been involved in have been very sparsely attended. This particular budget hearing may be small because if you'll remember a week ago at council meeting when I introduced the budget, we covered it at great length for some 2 hours that night, and many people had an opportunity to examine the budget and know in detail what was in it. So that may be a part of the problem.
What effect do you think that last night's passage of the refuse collection fees raising from $2 to $4 have on tonight's crowd?
Well, the passage of the trash ordinance, or the increase in the trash and garbage fee ordinance, certainly was a part of this budget, and the budget could not be adopted without this increase being, which is a part of it. And this budget containing the $1,500,000 increase because of this fee is now in line for easy passage, I think. I thought that would have caused more debate, but it was a 9-0 vote and no debate, so except for a minor amendment or two.
This year's budget is about almost $3.5 million more than last year. First of all, some explanations on why so much more and then some problems you might have because of the large amount of increase.
Well, the increase this year is due for several reasons. One is inflation. We've had a tremendous inflation, and it's caught up with us like people in their homes and electric bills and gasoline bills and grocery bills and everything else. City government is no different. We also have a $1,500,000 worth of equipment that is necessary to be bought in this year's budget. We have salary increases proposed in this budget. Salary increases that are needed in all phases of city employee, for all phases of city employees. But basically the big item in this year's budget that is new is the heavy equipment buy that is necessary to keep our rolling stock on the street.
What about the increase in the police force? How much will that add to this year's budget?
Well, we're proposing 25 new police officers, all of whom will be patrol officers or street officers, and plus their equipment, their cars and their equipment. This will add approximately $375,000 to this year's budget, and I wish I could afford to put in there enough for another 50 officers. We need them.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Farmer. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I'll get back to the hearing.
Okay, this is Dave Rickey reporting live from City Council Chambers. Back to you, Bob.
Well, with the bollworm and the fall armyworm situation in Montgomery County, we have had some farmers to report to me, and from my checking, that they're going to have about a 50% reduction in cotton yield this year from a normal crop. This is from a normal year. And this is caused, like I said, from the fall armyworm and the bollworm.
What about the bollworm versus the armyworm as far as destruction is concerned?
The bollworm is a very serious pest and also is a fall armyworm, and this is the first time in the 60 years that we've been keeping records that the fall armyworm has done severe damage on cotton crops. We need to know how to distinguish between these two worms. The bollworm has a yellowish-brown head, and the fall armyworm has a black head. And the fall armyworm most of them have the distinguishing Y on the heads.
The bollworm versus the boll weevil, which is the greater problem?
The bollworm is definitely the greater problem this year. We think that our cold winter has helped us considerably with the boll weevil, although we do have some hatch-outs now, and the farmers need to really be checking closely for the boll weevils now.
Where's the bollworm coming from?
The bollworm is coming from a moth. This moth is a brownish-looking moth, and they overwinter in the pupa stage, which is the egg, larva, pupa, and adult. And when they emerge, they have to, as the first stage is the egg, and then they come out from this into the larva, and this is what does our damage to the cotton crops. And when they enter a boll, the boll is gone. They eat into the boll and just damage the boll.
Is this widespread, not only confined to Alabama, but other sections?
It's widespread, yes, sir. Any of the cotton places, places that produces a lot of cotton does have considerable damage to bollworm.
The Pasofino gait, which is the extremely collected gait. Every muscle of the horse should be working in the Pasofino gait.
And the ride is supposed to be exceptionally smooth.
The smoothest ride in the world. It's called the Cadillac of horses.
And this is a Pasofino stud. This is a horse you brought from where?
I bought him in Valdosta, Georgia, but his ancestors came from Colombia.
I see. This is a Colombian Pasofino.
Right, he's Colombian.
Okay, now Robin is coming by on a little younger horse.
He's a 3-year-old Puerto Rican. He's also doing the Pasofino gait.
Okay, now we're looking at a little different gait. As you notice, the horse is traveling a little faster, covering a little more ground. What is this called?
That's a Paso Largo. That means long gait.
I notice she's bouncing just a hair normal, but still riding very smoothly.
That is also one of the smoothest rides in the world. All of them should be smooth. One just as smooth as the other.
Marshall, some of these good Alabama farmers might think you're plowing right now, but you're not doing that, are you?
No, this is the way you show the horse in conformation. It's called Bay of Forma. The horse must display the gait to enter the conformation class, and this is the way we show them.
So it's without rider and saddle, I guess, so you can get a real good look at the horse.
Right, and also you can show the younger horses.
Oh, I see, before you put saddle on them,
Right.
before they're old enough to be ridden, huh? Because they must have the gait. That's the key to the whole breed, huh?
They must display the gait.
Run it, Eric! Oh, baby, come on, man, get him in line.
Bill Moss in
Rawlings have been starting on offense for 3 years. This will be their 3rd year. Joe scored 2 touchdowns against Lee last year. I think one was for 80 yards and one was for 60 yards, which kept us in the ball game. And Marshall had a real good spring. We're looking forward to him really helping us. Eric Rawlings, on the other hand, is an impressive fullback. He gained almost 1,000 yards last year. He'll carry the ball about 25 times for us each ball game.
Okay, those are a couple of your strong points. Anything at this point that you're particularly worried about?
Yes, we don't have a punting game as of the present time. We haven't been able to find a punter. We're working real hard, and we've got 1 week to get one that can kick it over 25 yards, and that's one of our great weak points.
I'll put it down in hopefully plain terms. The legislature appropriated some $10 million for this year. Revenues fell short for about $3.5 million. The legislature removed that spending limitation for this year. However, the spending limitation, and that is that courts must produce the revenues they spend, is still in the budget law for this upcoming fiscal year, which is October 1. All right. Now, revenues are still being produced, but remember, the state, according to law, is now assuming an additional 800 employees. So you can easily see that if the revenue level remains the same, there's a much more dramatic problem come October 1, because you've got an additional assumption of some $8 million.
Well, this is going to take action by the legislature.
I think so. I believe that it is necessary.
And this will result in them coming in special session.
Well, the courts cannot call a special session, but that matter, hopefully, will be considered.
But there doesn't seem to be any alternative.
Well, oh yes, the alternatives are harsh. Those alternatives are to lay people off, close certain courts, and I feel that I have an administrative responsibility to keep the courts operating, limited perhaps, but to try to keep them operating. Very, very hard management decisions. I would like for the legislature to address itself to those problems. But until they do, I'm the one under the gun who has to make these decisions.
For them to address themselves to the situation, they will have to be in session.
That is correct.
Are you recommending to the governor that they be called in?
Well, that may be a little premature, but as soon as all of these studies are complete, I plan to discuss it, and I also plan to discuss it publicly.
And what we want to do is point out to the citizens that while we're doing everything that we can within our power with the police department, is that we need some citizen input in notifying the police department of any strange activities that they might see in the neighborhoods. For example, we had 2 burglaries last week that were observed by people in the neighborhood that could have resulted in immediate apprehension of the burglars should the call have been made to the police department. And what we want to say to the citizens is that we don't mind answering false alarms, and that we solicit and ask those citizens to assist us by calling the police department if they see something strange in the neighborhood. First of all, the rock show should not have been scheduled on Sunday night and would not have had the approval of the mayor's office or anybody else's for an event on Sunday night of this type. Second, it was not registered with the police department, and therefore we did not have proper security. The hoodlums who set out to destroy a fun evening for the rest of the citizens of Montgomery who wished to attend this event were mostly juveniles and a few teenagers, and they will be dealt with. But the question has arisen as to what we will do to maintain the peace at our high school football games. And I want to say to the citizens of Montgomery that whatever it takes, we will maintain the peace and law and order at our football games, and people may come to the football games with the full assurance that they will, in peace, be able to enjoy this wonderful part of Montgomery's life. We will ensure the safety of our citizens in the parking lot and in the stadium, and we will put whatever number of police officers in the field to ensure this.
Thank you, Bob. Mrs. Morton, you've only been on the job about 3 months now, 3 weeks that is now. What kind of problems have you run into so far?
Well, not any problems particularly at this point. It's been a little bit longer than 3 weeks. As a matter of fact, I started on the job immediately at the point my name was sent to the Hill by the president. I've not encountered any problems. There is an awful lot of work to do. I suppose if I were to characterize anything as being a problem, it's from having to work from perhaps 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock in the evening. But it's enjoyable. It's very challenging.
Has the fact that you are a woman hindered you at all in your work so far?
No, it has not. A woman, by the way, has been treasurer since 1949, so I've not been hampered at all. As a matter of fact, I think it's perhaps probably to my favor and best interest that a woman is in the job. It is the first time that a black woman has held a job. That's a history-making event in itself, but it has not been a hindrance at all.
Okay. What kind of problems do you foresee that you might run into? You said you have had none so far, but do you know of any, say, that a past treasurer might have run into that you think you might run into at the same time?
Well, I would imagine that if there are any problems at all, it might be in the manner in which things are changed within the federal government. And it's not just problems I will encounter, it's problems that others will encounter as well, particularly if we consider that the president wants to reorganize the federal government, and when you try to reorganize something that is as old as the federal government, obviously you're going to encounter resistance. So the process of reorganization will probably pose some problems. This job calls for an awful lot of traveling, which I don't particularly want to do. I will do some of it, obviously, but I want to curtail my traveling to the extent that I can. So in the process of reorganization, you may have situations where people might be either transferred or put into some other job category, which they may not like. But again, I think if that's handled correctly, it will not pose a problem.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Morton, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Bob, back to you.
Still standing.
You're probably talking about a minimum of $100,000.
My name is Carl Carlson. I'm at 754 Edward Drive in St. David. My name is fine, sir. I was about to...
What is the library museum building?
Pardon?
The library museum building, I'm not familiar with.
What is it?
In addition to the mosquitoes, rats, and the snakes. So I started first.
Downstairs in the museum upstairs.
Okay, now I'm writing on that, thank you. Okay, I'm just looking down. Okay, then can you act on this before the legalities?
Citizen participation group hearings and ask for these funds.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, the increase this year is due for several reasons. One is inflation. We've had a tremendous inflation, and it's caught up with us like people in their homes and electric bills and gasoline bills and grocery bills and everything else. City government is no different. We also have $1,500,000 worth of equipment that is necessary to be bought in this year's budget. We have salary increases proposed in this budget. Salary increases that are needed in all phases of city employee, for all phases of city employees. But basically the big item in this year's budget that is new is the heavy equipment buy that is necessary to keep our rolling stock on the street.
Heights Junior High School, where he provided outstanding leadership to the faculty and the communities in developing an educational program to the position of Assistant Superintendent in the Montgomery school system and repair, and new construction proceeded in an orderly fashion. And whereas in the crucial days, continuous service in this system, this resolution to the Honorable
Mr. Aither, Mr. Scott Aither from the NIL would like to say a few words.
Both interested and invested. Speaking for myself for a moment, though, as though for those us to poll the young men and the young women that work for him, using the question, is there anything startling revelation? The day, however, when my wife and I were notified that our son had been districted, but that is good. I can see it.
We're going to our building projects now. We've got a list of them. Yeah, list. I was this gentleman's coach. It's been on.
Mr. Renfro. Thank you. Could an ignorant superintendent ask a question?
All right.
Did you coach him in junior high or senior high?
I did.
The first question. Yeah. Mr. Neal, is it at all conceivable that Richard Nixon truly did not understand the meaning of the statute on obstruction of justice as he seemed to not understand it in his discussion with Mr. Frost last night?
Tom, I think that the truth of the matter is he didn't. I've always had the hunch that Mr. Nixon did not know he was violating the law. I thought at times, the criminal laws in this country are enormously complicated, and I thought at times maybe we should have a good criminal lawyer on the White House staff.
But the fact of the matter is he did not get the best possible legal advice, Carl, as you discovered during the course of your reporting, both in the
His
first
legal
book.
defense was a shambles throughout.
So would it surprise you that he did not know, for instance, the exact meaning of obstruction of justice and thought that even though he had raised the cover-up and participated in it possibly early on and then tried to contain it only politically in his mind, that he was not violating the law?
I think someone probably could read Mr. Nixon the statute and he would apply it to himself in a way such as that he wanted to see himself.
But there were these strange formulations. For example, he explained that he didn't consider that he was obstructing justice because he wasn't trying to protect some individual. This was for political containment. Well, what does political containment mean? What politician was to profit from this containment? In fact, it did come down to individuals, Mr. Nixon included. Isn't that so?
Contemporaneous accounts of what was going on at the White House at the time are consistent with what he said last night, that indeed he did not believe and told people at the time he didn't believe he was obstructing justice. He was merely doing things politically as other presidents had done, which he said very often during that period. And when Dean came in to tell him, we're vulnerable, Mr. President, you might be vulnerable, he disputed Dean. I think he earnestly believed, and still does, that he did not obstruct justice, that he had managed to skirt the statute.
They tried to invoke Harry Truman's name last night. Frost cut him off before we knew exactly what he was getting at, I suppose, the 5%er scandal of some years ago.
I don't think he thought he was obstructing justice during the course of this, and I think the explanation last night of motive and so forth, I think that was developed in preparation for the, I don't think it was that fine reasoning during the course of it. I think that was developed for the program.
Did you feel that, as you watched it, that you would have preferred to have been sitting in Mr. Frost's seat and that you would have done things differently? And if so, how would you have done them differently?
Well, I think everyone has a different way. I think Mr. Frost did what he could, given the time limitations. He went step by step, fact by fact, rather than going always to the bottom line of did you conspire. He took it step by step.
He was accused a couple of times of quoting things out of context and leaving out what the former president considered to be important statements within the transcripts. As you evaluated what he said, both of you, could you see where David Frost may have quoted things out of context or may have cut some corners he shouldn't have?
No, in fact, I thought Mr. Frost was extraordinarily fair. I thought Mr. Nixon took considerable liberties with the record.
Mr. Neal?
Well, I thought Mr. Frost was fair. The truth of the matter is, when you're taking the role of a cross-examiner, you always take the things out and you present them to the witness being cross-examined. You don't just read down a transcript. You say, didn't you say such and such? And he can come back and say, yes, I did, but at another place I said something else that makes that coherent or different than the meaning you're... So you always go to specific points in a matter like that.
But television's not a courtroom, and it's important, I think, to remember that this program last night was not a court of law and was not intended to be.
Thank you both for being here. It's time now for another station break.
See the Reds versus the Pirates or the A's versus the Yankees Saturday. Check local listings.
And good morning again at 1/2 That's the way Louisville, Kentucky looks like. That, of course, is the Ohio River and the skyline of Louisville, a storied town, if there ever was one, famed for bourbon and cigarettes, enormous factories, Muhammad Ali, and, of course, the Kentucky Derby. The 103rd running of the Kentucky Derby will be this Saturday at Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky. And good morning, I'm Jane Pauley here with Gene Shalit. Tom Brokaw is on assignment in Washington. And in this half hour, I'm going to be talking with Brian Garfield. He is a novelist, a prolific mystery writer, the author of Death Wish, for example. He's written a new book called Recoil that isn't violent at all, and he himself is opposed to television violence, and that's what we'll be talking about in this half hour. Good morning,
All right, Jane. We're also going to have some good music. Les Paul and George Benson playing some out-of-sight guitar that you really have to hear.
And maybe Floyd Calber can find a little good news for us somewhere, but you get on with the business first.
Thank you. Richard Nixon ended his 3-year silence on Watergate in that much heralded televised interview last night. The former president admitted that he had lied in dealing with the scandal, but he denied that he had ever obstructed justice. Nixon told interviewer David Frost that in his zeal to protect aides, whom he believed to be innocent, he started acting as a lawyer for their defense. Thus, Nixon